Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here, welcome back to the railway and welcome to another review. Up to date, it's a brand new tank engine from Oxford Rail. Here's something crazy for you. It has been almost 3 years since Oxford Rail first released their N7 tank engine. Can you believe that? Where has that time gone? But yes, in January 2022, it will have been 3 years since the first N7 came out. Crazy stuff. And when I reviewed that first N7 back in 2019, I was incredibly impressed, to say the least. For the money, it was a very, very good tank engine, and it came in second place, I think it was, in my 2019 rankings. So it was a good loco, which makes the fact that Oxford have just released a brand new version of it all the more exciting, if you ask me. And even better than that, I've got one right here. So this is it. This is the new N7. It is in the BR black, but there's something a bit special about this because according to the online listings, this livery has some, what do they call it? Crew embellishments, I think. So it's BR black with a few extras, and I really love the idea of that. Not seen anything like that before, so that in itself I'm really, really excited for. The other great thing about this loco so far is the price, because despite all that's happened over the last year or two, this loco is still available for less than £100. I think that's really wonderful. So the RRP on Oxford website is £114.95 currently, and I bought this one from Hatton's for £98, which is only around £10 more than it cost me back in 2019. Considering everything that's gone on, I think that's not too bad. Therefore, locos like this, in my opinion, are really, really important for this hobby, because other manufacturers, I mean, name one, they would have us believe that you have to pay an awful lot of money these days to get a good locomotive. We're seeing tank engines at 150 quid and even tiny tender engines at over £200. So if Oxford Rail, still manufacturing in China, just like all those other companies are, still under the same stresses and strains economically and otherwise that they are, can still produce a high quality tank engine for less than £100, then I will go on believing that those other manufacturers could as well if they wanted to. And if you're interested in picking up an Oxford N7, I will include affiliate links down in the description for you. But today, let's find out what this is like. It's quite rare to find a tank engine for less than £100, and I'm really fascinated to see whether it's still any good. So together, let's find out. Wow, so I don't even remember when I pre-ordered this loco, but it certainly was a really, really long time. Pretty sure this has been delayed quite heavily, but then again, given everything that's been going on this past couple of years, that's perfectly understandable. And of course, the main thing is it's here now. So let's take a look at this. Let's see what we get. Inside the box, I can see there's some really lovely lining on this loco, so can't wait to see that. Let me show you the version I've got here then on the end of the box. Just flip it up for you. So it is OR76 N7004. It is in the BR late. It is a 062 tank engine, class N7, and there's the number there, which is 69670. Almost a nice there, but I'm not going to go and say it because it's immature, and I'm very mature. Okay, well, there's not an awful lot to see on the box. It's just loads of warnings and stuff, so let's get this out. I am actually really excited about this because the original model had a lot of really nice features, and I'm so used to seeing it in the grey, and yet here it is now in a completely different livery. It looks quite small, actually. I don't remember the N7 being as short as this, but it does look pretty cute, doesn't it, in this livery? Wow. I've always been amazed by just how easily a change of livery can transform a loco. It's almost unrecognisable. It's really crazy. Anyway, so we've got an operation and maintenance booklet here. It is an N7, yes, so they've got that right. I think on the last loco, I think it also said it was an N7 or something, but this actually is, so that's good. You've got a bit of history on the class there, so pause and read it if you'd like to. Let's remind ourselves what's in here then. So it shows you how to fit brake rigging, although I didn't see any in the box, so I think it's already fitted. so that's strange, but it's good to know how to refit it, I suppose. Running in period and locomotive lubrication, so yes, this does need a run in, shows you how to lubricate it. Don't run on carpet, don't worry, don't do things like that. Removal of loco body and location of socket, so yeah, body removal is quite easy with these, done it before. The decoder goes in the coal bunker, I believe, yeah, you can see there, and it does have a coreless motor, I believe, which I'm not the hugest fan of, but in this case they've used quality ones and they do run really, really well, or at least the 2019 one did. So if this is the same, then I won't have a major problem with that. Hints and tips, yeah, just the usual on the back of there. Very nice. Okay, seems to cover most bases. So let's take a look inside, shall we? Now, there is a very, very small accessories bag right here. Yeah, I'm not kidding. Very, very small. Just literally a couple of vacuum pipes or maybe steam heat pipes, which means that everything else is fitted to the Loco already, which is quite impressive again, because these are pretty well detailed Locos. To say that the factory have had to apply everything except 2 little bits of plastic, it's quite impressive again for the price. So let's see whether they messed it up or whether they got it good. All right, how's the finish? Well, I mean, it is a little bit of a Hornby finish, isn't it? And by that I mean not particularly satin, a little bit flat, not the greatest finish in the world, and that's quite typical of Oxford. However, that's reflected in the price. Far, far worse if it had this kind of finish and cost 150 quid, and that we've seen quite a lot. So yeah, it could be worse. Right, here we go. Oh, you know what? It never ceases to amaze me just how heavy these Locos are. And if you're not familiar with why these are so heavy, let me fill you in. Because we've got a running plate, which is die cast, we've got a coal bunker at the back here, which is die cast, and we've got these tanks here, which are die cast. The only visible parts of the model which are not sort of die cast are the smoke box, boiler, and cab. Everything else is made of metal, and seriously, this is really, really heavy. I will definitely get this on the scales. But besides the weight, look at this thing. This has got quite a complex livery. The chimney is separately painted. The smoke box looks absolutely unbelievable. How many times have we had to pay a premium price for a model and the manufacturer said, oh well, it's the livery, costs a lot to produce it? Well, Oxford Rail must be using black magic then, because this livery looks fairly complex and yet they've still pulled it off really quite inexpensively. Yeah, this looks really great, doesn't it? It's a really, really cool looking model. Feels great in the hands, seems to be quality. I mean, I've not noticed any bits dropping off it, so that's a good sign. Yeah, already really, really happy with this thing. So we'll take a closer look in just a second. We'll see what this does well and what it doesn't do so well. But first, here's a little bit of history on the class in real life. So this class started life on the GER, which is the Great Eastern Railway, where they were first built to the design of Alfred John Hill back in 1915. So they are a pre-grouping locomotive. At this time, they were known as the GER Class L77, and they sported an elegant 062 wheel configuration running on 2 inside cylinders and Walschaerts valve gear, which was an unusual feature for inside cylinder locos. The design was mainly used for passenger work on the suburbs of London, and then when grouping occurred in 1923, Nigel Gresley continued to produce the design way up until 1928, so some of them were not produced during the pre-grouping era, and by that time a hefty 134 had been built in total. And this complicates things a little bit because they were produced over so many years. There were a lot of different subclasses, I think 6 different subclasses, which eventually existed in total, and they each had very slightly different design features, such as different fireboxes. I think that was the main one. The entirety of the class survived the 1948 nationalisation, but in 1957 the first member of the class was withdrawn, and by 1962 the remainder had been withdrawn from service and scrapped, with only one exception, that was number 7999, which was preserved. So there she is, up close and personal for you, the beautiful Oxford N7 in the BR Black with the extra embellishments on it, which I absolutely love. And the good news is that this Loco is still a fantastic model. It still offers outstanding value for money, and I still think it was worth every penny. However, what is a little bit less good for this model is the fact that since 2019, when this was first released, we have seen massive improvements in the way that models are produced. We've seen great improvements to the refinement and the finesse of new models that come out, and perhaps the result of that is that parts of this model maybe look a little bit less refined than other new Locos. Don't get me wrong, all of this is completely fine for the money and it's all reflected in the price. But there are one or two things that caught my eye. Now, the list of negatives is much shorter than the list of positives, don't get me wrong, but we'll start with the negatives and then we'll become a little bit more positive later on. So I think the biggest detraction from this is still the wheels. As you can see, these are not the most realistic looking wheels because you've got the unpainted axles poking through, and obviously real locomotive wheels don't look like that. And they haven't even been painted, so that is quite a noticeable downside. The other issue is that you can see sort of two moulding lines on the side of the boiler of this version of the N7. Now, this was not a problem with the grey N7 that I looked at in 2019 because that had those sort of pipes running along the boiler. I think they were for the condensing equipment, but this version doesn't have those pipes as per this prototype. And so those lines are actually visible on the boiler now. And also around that parting line you can see where the lining joins up. It's not 100% accurate. In some places towards the front it is, and it looks really, really good. Towards the back there are slight issues with it. Again, fine for the money, but not quite as refined as we've seen from some Locos. The fit of some of the parts is a little bit questionable in places. I suppose these things are a little bit less forgivable. So yeah, you can see the splashers appear to be rising up from the die-cast running plate a little bit. And also the front of the smoke box is not a good fit, unfortunately. You can see that there's a gap behind it, and I'm trying to push that down. It does seem to be sort of stuck in that position. So I don't want to try and fix that for fear of breaking it. And then the final minor issue is that some of the die casting, I think the best area you can see this is around the back of the coal bunker. Yeah, it's a little bit bobbly in places. The texture isn't 100% smooth, which does detract from the overall realism of the model if you're looking at it up close. It's not 100% perfect, and I do think it's fine for the money, but these are things you should bear in mind if you're thinking of getting one of these. That said, I think a lot of people would rather have these issues and be able to afford the model than not have these issues and the model costing much, much more and it being out of reach of most people. So now let's get a little bit more positive. Let's talk about the weight, which is absolutely unbelievable. So this thing weighs in at 297 grams, which is more than the Bachmann City class with its tender. It's more than the heavy Hornby D16 with its tender. And get this, it's even more than the Hornby Q6, which is a heavy 080 locomotive, also with a tender. It's heavier than all of those, which is really impressive, makes these great pullers, of course. Now, I've already mentioned that the finish isn't the best on this, and that's true. It is a little bit of a flat, plasticky finish, but in some lights, it's not too bad. You can see we've got a little bit of shining going on with the boiler there, so it's definitely not too bad. And the same thing goes with the decoration, really. Yes, it's not that accurate on the boiler, but in other areas, the lining looks really good. The coal bunker looks fantastic. The water tanks also look absolutely fine. Lovely lining around that. You've got the late British Railways crest, not too bad an application that. And then you've got the route availability also printed. You've got the warning signs for the high voltage. Again, you've got one of those on the front splasher as well as a little print there. Maybe that's a builder's plate. I'll have to check that out. I think the smoke box door is where the embellishments come in. You can see you've got this lovely lining around the outside of it, and the smoke box dart is also painted into the white. Yeah, I think that's super unusual, and I really, really like it. Same with the chimney as well. You can see the top of the chimney. It's not made of metal, this chimney, unfortunately. But yeah, that's been painted white as well. Perhaps not 100% accurately, but from any sort of distance, it looks really cool. I think that is unique in my collection. I'm not sure that I've got any other chimneys that look quite like that. The other impressive thing is that this is not just a repaint of the grey N7, there are differences in the tooling. We've already talked about the lack of condensing equipment, but you've also got different safety valves as well. You can see this has got more traditional looking safety valves, which are made of metal. Yeah, they don't look it because they've been painted, but they are made of metal. And then you've got this whistle here, which wasn't on the original grey N7. I think that's plastic, but it's very, very nicely moulded. And then the most beautiful part is this pump over here on the other side of the smoke box. just look at the level of detail on that thing. We've seen far more expensive locos than this have far messier paint jobs applied to very fine parts like that. And so this one's really quite impressive to me. Very accurate decoration, lots of nicely painted pipework around it. Really, really impressive. It's actually worth running the Loco in a certain direction so that you can actually see that as it runs. Well, there is a lot of good stuff on this Loco to look at. You've got the intricate reversing rod. I think that is just made of plastic and it's a little bit flimsy, so not the greatest quality there, but it looks the part. You've got the opening air intake on top of the cab, which is a really sort of premium feature, isn't it? I remember when Hornby used to shout about that sort of thing, but here it is on a cheaper Loco. You've got really quite good looking windows on the back of the Loco with this sort of grille on it. The other windows are glazed, as you can see, nice flush glazing with lining around them. The front facing windows have different coloured lining around them. They're sort of a metal colour. And then inside the cab you've got an insane level of detail. You can see all of the gauges and such are picked out. There are separately fitted parts. I can see there's a wheel inside there. Yeah, this is a really enclosed cab, and yet there is a lot of detail in there, which is really, really impressive. Behind the cab, you've got the coal load. Not the greatest coal load. There seems to be a little bit of an issue with the paint on there. There's white spots on it, but not a huge deal, of course, but I need to point these things out. You've got this quite elegant looking coal guard around the back, which I've always liked. And then on the actual back of the coal bunker, you've got, look at this, separately fitted lamp brackets, so they haven't cut down on that sort of thing. You've got the little holders there for the different tools, separately fitted handrails. You've got the buffer beam details pre-fitted, including the coupling hooks. Although that's a point, we didn't get any of the screw-link couplings with this model, unfortunately. Metal sprung buffers, that's a great feature, isn't it? Love that a lot. And then pre-fitted NEM couplings in both the front and back of the model. And as you can see, the front buffer beam is much the same in terms of its detail, and it also has more separately fitted lamp irons on it as well. There is one more noticeable omission, and that is the lack of valve gear or anything between the frames. It is a perfectly flat area down there, and I think that's another sign that this is a budget model, because most modern Locos will have some representation between the frames there. Having said that though, there is something going on a little bit further back. Can you see that? Yeah, it almost looks like the top of the frames of the valve gear or something. So yeah, there's something there, but nothing of very much substance. Yeah, there's some evidence of cost being cut, and particularly where parts of the decoration are concerned, and perhaps the assembly of the wheels, there is evidence that this is not the highest quality and most expensive Loco in the world. But then again, there are a lot of unexpected features this Loco has, which are just unbelievable given how cheap it was. The sprung buffers, the sort of opening intake in the top of the cab, all of the metalwork and the weight, all completely unbelievable for a Loco of under £100 these days. So overall, very, very impressed with this thing. Is it perfect? No. But is it worth every penny? I think so. I think so. I think we've seen a lot worse than this that costs a lot more. So that needs to be applauded. Okay, well, I'm really interested to take a look at the mechanism, because back in 2019, I would have just had a cursory glance. These days, I go into a lot more detail, so I'm really interested to know what sort of quality we're dealing with here on the mechanism. And again, if it's as good as I think it is, very impressive for the money. So let's go down onto the track and let's find out. So there she is, the beautiful Oxford N7 in the lovely, lovely, handsome BR Black, down onto the track, ready for the first test. Now, on paper, the mechanism is high quality, high spec, very good. But in practice, the way it's been manufactured actually seems to leave quite a lot to be desired, and it's actually quite a bit worse than the grey N7 that I bought back in 2019, and I'll explain why in just a second. But just in anticipation of the possible comments, because I know this is the first Loco from Oxford I've reviewed since the Hornby takeover, no, I don't think it's reasonable to blame Hornby in any way for this. This is an Oxford project through and through. These have been in development long before the Hornby takeover, and as far as I know anyway, Hornby have a very hands-off approach when it comes to Oxford rail. So unless there's evidence of Hornby messing about with Oxford stuff, it's not fair to jump onto that bandwagon. Anyway, let me tell you about my findings then. So it's not all bad. First of all, we have the rear pony, which is sprung. That's an issue with some Oxford Locos, but not this one. Not a huge amount of springiness, but there is some there. You've got invisible pickups, and by that I mean they touch the top of the wheel rather than the bottom, which is great for visual purposes, but when it comes to removing the base keeper plate, it's a bit less convenient because it's hard to get them reseated properly. Anyway, in removing the base keeper plate, I noticed that the screws were loose. Didn't think anything of it at the time, but that is very significant, so bear that in mind for just a second. But the base keeper plate is easily removable with spring-loaded contacts, which is great for access. And that revealed the proper metal turned bearings on each of the driving axles and also the single driven axle, which in this case was at the back. Now I did notice that the bearings were not a great fit into the chassis and they seemed to keep wanting to jump loose. It was quite difficult actually to get the base keeper plate back on because they kept coming out of place. That wasn't an issue with the grey N7 that I looked at before, so I was starting to smell a little bit of a problem. Anyway, the big problem came with refitting the base keeper plate. So look at this. This is with the screws slightly loose as they were straight out of the box. And as you can see, the axles are nice and free to turn. However, if I tighten the screws as they are supposed to be tightened, you can see that the axles become far stiffer. There's very little travel left and right, and there's noticeably huge amounts of friction. Now this is very concerning. You shouldn't have to loosen the screws that hold moving parts in order for them to move properly. I've seen that before with Helgen, but I'm very surprised to see it here with Oxford Rail. And that is not the case yet again with my grey N7. Those screws can be fully tightened up without any problems. So has there been a degradation in the tooling? Is there a quality problem with my single example? I don't know, but the factory know about this problem, because if they were ignorant of it, they'd be tightening the screws as normal. The fact that the screws were halfway loose is very telling. The factory know about this problem and they haven't addressed it. They've just loosened the screws, which is not good. I also noticed a sort of white powdery texture on some of the wheels now that they were in a better light. Not the case on all of them. And in fact, once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. The rear driving wheels have a very sort of powdery grey finish to them and it's noticeable. So that's not the greatest quality either. Anyway, removing the body, the chassis is quite neat, as you can see. It does house a very modest sized coreless motor, but those are excellent performers, or at least they were 3 years ago in the grey versions. And it's also got a flywheel, as you can see. Now there's also this huge capacitor inside the Loco. Now you're going to think this is a stay alive capacitor, but obviously it isn't because it's soldered to the blanking plate and not the decoder socket. So if you fitted a decoder, you would lose that stay alive capacitor. So I think this is just acting as a flywheel for DC. It's a very high capacity capacitor, 100 microfarads, so that's pretty darn high. I don't know if that makes this a super capacitor or not, but it certainly has enough capacitance to keep a motor going for a second. So that's something new I've learnt about the N7. I didn't realise they had such high capacity capacitors on them. And then finally, the gauging is okay. I measured 14.3mm, 14.4 and 14.5 respectively, so not dreadfully consistent, but none of those values are at a point where they're going to be causing problems. So not the greatest. That whole issue with the loose screws is very disappointing and surprising. Really didn't expect to see that on a high quality Oxford Loco, and I'd be very interested to know if this issue is more widespread. So please do check your Oxford N7s and let me know what the answer is to that. Anyway, does the thing work? I'm a bit nervous about the answer to that question, so let's find out. No, it doesn't work. Oh, you're joking. That's 50% speed. Oh. Well, there was a sign of life. But not much. Oh. Is that it? Are we going now? That's weird. Totally dead and now managing okay? That's odd. Cutting out on the express points a bit, but... Right, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm just going to stop filming for a second and I'm going to do a continuity test with each wheel just to make sure they're each actually making contact. Alright, I'll let you know. Be right back. Okay, yes, each of the wheels is making contact, all of the pickups are working fine. Because it's a bit fiddly to refit the base keeper plate and you have to jiggle the pickups around a bit, I just wanted to make absolutely sure that I hadn't made a mistake in putting the base keeper back on, but all the pickups are functioning as they should, so this is a fair representation of this model's performance. Okay, so it's not great, it is struggling as the back wheels go over the express point, which is a bit odd. We'll have to wait and see if running in fixes that problem. But yeah, confidence waning a little bit in this. Maybe it will be much better. Maybe it will. I'm just trying to crawl right now. And it's dead. There we are, we're up to 50 now and it's dead. Okay, so maybe it's just stalling. I don't know, maybe the pickups just need wearing in a little bit. Maybe the chassis have been sitting in the factory for longer than we think. I don't know. Let's try forwards. So that's a really good crawl forwards, which shows that there is a potential there to do great things. And we know that there is because the grey N7 is a superb performer. I suppose if I run this in and the performance improves greatly and it doesn't keep cutting out, then this will be forgivable. The issue with the base keeper plate screws will always be at the back of the mind, but at least it will be a good runner. If things don't improve, then this is more of a serious problem. Don't forget, this is a cheap Loco, but it's still nearly £100, so it needs to be perfect in its performance. Look at that. That was a sudden stop, wasn't it? Okay, so yeah, the potential's there to be a good performer. It's got proper bearings, plenty of pickups, obviously a good motor. It's just, are those parts able to work properly together given the slight issues in quality of the assembly and possibly even the die casting of the chassis itself? I'm not sure, but it stopped again. Oh, no, it hasn't. Yeah, there's something not quite right. But like the instructions say, it does need to be run in, so I'm going to do that now before I draw any conclusions. Hopefully all the issues will disappear. Alright, 50%. So it seems to be handling the track okay at 50%, not a bad speed. Yeah, I would say that's really quite good. Some Locos can be a bit speedy at 50%. This one is definitely more fast than it is slow, but it seems to be running at a competent speed at the very least. So yeah, we'll leave this to run. Hopefully it won't have any issues as it runs along, and hopefully when I see you next, it will have blossomed into a superb performer. Please do keep your fingers crossed on that one. Well folks, running in is complete, and I've got to be honest with you, that was a disaster. Things far from improved, let's put it that way. So the cutting out continued well into the running in period, still stopping on the express points. Okay, that's one issue. Occasional derailments. When I was doing the running in, I managed to catch this one on camera, but it did it several other times, derailing in reverse. And here is the grey version from 3 years ago doing the exact same thing on the same speed setting, noticeably a bit slower for some reason, but crucially it did not derail. Well, that's too many problems for my liking, so I decided to do some investigation, and what I discovered was quite shocking. Remember this video I made about changing the wheel configurations of locomotives? And in fact, I took out the centre driving wheels of an Oxford N7 to see what would happen, kind of as a joke, not a very serious video. Well, it seems that Oxford Rail have taken that video quite seriously, because look at this. You can see the middle right driving wheel is actually not touching the track, obviously. The left one looks like it's touching the track, but if I take it off the track and put it on a flat surface, you can see that the flange of that wheel is actually still not touching the table where the rest of them are. And actually you can see that the Loco is able to pivot and rock because the wheels are at different heights. And this points to a very, very serious chassis problem. And that right there is going to be the cause of the problems, isn't it? If the wheels are not touching the track properly, what hope has the Loco got of running properly? And if I swap the Loco out for the grey N7, you can see that all of the driving wheels do sit on the track properly. So it's not supposed to be like that or anything. It is such a shame to see the quality of a really, really great Loco fall as much as this. I can't say whether or not this is just an issue with my example, I really hope it is, but I am going to be returning this Loco for a replacement. I'll let you know what happens with that later on, but for now this is the Loco that I'm reviewing. Serious issues. And yes, faults do occur from time to time, that's fair enough, but I think the biggest problem is that the loose screws on the bottom of this chassis indicate to me that the factory were aware of the chassis issues, maybe just on this example, but possibly on others too, and their solution was to ignore it and loosen the screws and mask the issue rather than to solve it or discard that chassis as faulty and not send it out as a working product. That is the problem, isn't it, right? Factories finding faults and ignoring them and not fixing them. And you know what? They would have gotten away with that if the screws were tight. I would have just thought, you know, that was just a fault that managed to slip through. No, the fact that they've actually responded by loosening those screws proves that somebody at Oxford or at the factory was aware of this problem and they let it through and they let it come to a customer. And what bad luck it came to me. Anyway, yeah, the crawl is amazing. I have to say, when it does it, it's okay. But obviously it's got the pickup capability of an 040 because the centre wheels are not touching the track properly. But it's a great crawler. Yes, it doesn't cut out quite as much as it used to, but it still does on points and stuff because obviously it's missing a pair of pickups and a pair of driving wheels, crucially. Now, if you watch that video where I changed the wheel configuration of Locos, you'll know that this doesn't really affect the pulling power, and indeed it hasn't. The tractive effort is 0.44 newtons, which is 27 coaches on straight and level track. So yeah, the weight and the pulling power is immense. Anyway, we'll do a running session. I will show you it working. It doesn't derail going forwards on my outside line, so we should at least be able to do that. So I've set up a big rake of 3, 6, 7, 8 coaches. Yeah, 8 BR coaches, XL and ER ones, so that works out pretty well. Let's couple to them and just see how it goes. Yep, not cutting out there anymore, as you can see. I did try. Ooh, yeah, there's something wrong. Look at that, I'm not touching the controller now. The other N7 I have did not do that. And I did try, as I was about to say, I did try tightening the screws on the base keeper plate fully, just to see what would happen really. And that was the result really, just very, very jerky running, far, far worse than it is with the screws loosened. There's a serious issue, I really don't know what it is, and I really don't know how widespread it is. But the chances of me coming across a faulty one, if it is just one or two, are quite low, aren't they? So yeah, it doesn't inspire much confidence. But here we go. Let's go for 50% speed. And you can see that the pulling power is very, very good. Okay, and on the middle line, I've got my other Oxford N7 in the grey. And to be honest with you, this serves to prove just how effective this design can be. And this is why I'm so disappointed today, because this one was more or less perfect in every area. Ugh, black one's derailed. I think it's one of the coaches that's derailed. I'll deal with that in a minute. The only thing with this one, I would say, is that it's slowed down a lot. I don't think it used to be this slow, but for some reason it is much slower now. So maybe that's something to bear in mind as well. I don't know what the longevity of those motors is going to be like, but it's still a good runner, don't get me wrong, if I do a crawl. Yeah. Not crawling quite as well as the new one though, is it? Which is interesting. But it's not derailing and stopping all the time, and all of its wheels are on the track, so it's got that going for it. And then finally on the inside line, and say it with me folks, who makes the most reliable and best quality mechanisms in the hobby? Of course it's Hornby, and therefore we've got this Loco. Very poor quality mechanism, well, relatively speaking. It is the N2, and it's absolutely superb. Crawl. There we are, it's crawling. Doesn't look like it's moving, but it is. Ultra reliable, never derails, nothing special about it, but it just does the job. This is what every Loco should be like, and when a Loco doesn't run properly, I always run something like this just to show how it should be. So this is an absolutely beautiful model. It looks wonderful, and we know that they have the capability to run well. If for £98 this actually ran properly and did as it was supposed to do, I would say this was a wonderful bargain and it was worth every penny. The fact is though that there are a number of issues that really stop this from being a recommendable Loco. Some of this is forgivable, like the fit of the body components and stuff. As much as that isn't ideal, it is at least forgivable for such an inexpensive Loco. but I have to draw the line at chassis issues. As I always say, no matter how cheap a Loco is, if it doesn't work properly, if there are issues with the mechanism, then it's not worth any amount of money and it's no good. And for that reason, I really hope that my example is a one-off, or at least not typical of the latest N7s from Oxford, because if it is, then it's a dead loss, isn't it? But safe to say, really disappointed in this, because again, this would have been one of the best Locos of the year if the quality was there. Really would have been. Let's have some ratings then for the new Oxford N7 in the BR Black. Looking at the scores, I've got to say this feels awfully generous, giving it a score like this. I guess the reason is that the issues are just a small part of an otherwise really good model, so the scores don't reflect how serious the flaws are. But obviously, if it doesn't perform properly, then this doesn't mean very much. But the level of detail has to be 4.5 star. It's a really detailed Loco, particularly for the money. Great bit of decoration on there. The cab is marvellous. Sprung buffers, all the extra parts. This would have gotten 5 stars actually if it had better valve gear between the frames and also some screw link couplings included. Besides that, really great detail. Performance though, I've given 2.5 stars, maybe this is generous. Yeah, quite a lot of issues with this. Stopping, derailments, all caused by the fact that the centre driving wheels are not touching the track. That is crazy. However, again, there are good aspects of the performance as well. Obviously, it's a great, smooth, slow speed runner, and it does maintain a constant speed even with a load on the layout. So it's not all bad. I'm hoping mine is just a one-off fault. I guess we will find out in due course. Pulling power definitely pulls up the score as well. This has a tractive effort of 0.44 newtons, which is around 27 coaches on straight and level track. That's absolutely outstanding, so that is definitely a point in the Loco's favour. Mechanism then, again, this would ordinarily be 5 star because it's a great quality mechanism. However, there are issues with the fit of the different components. I'm assuming that's what the problem is, because you've got the centre driving wheels which are not situated properly. You tighten up the screws, you get great stiffness in the system, and by the way, I've tried tightening up the screws and running the thing. It becomes a horrible jerky mess. Yeah, there's a serious chassis problem, and that has to pull the mechanism score down, so I've given it 3 star, which again is probably generous. Quality then, overall this is a high quality model, and if it wasn't for the number of major issues preventing me from giving this a higher score, I certainly would be doing. But it's a high quality Loco, great build quality because there's no glue in sight. It's just, again, the fit of different components seems to be causing problems. And that's not just on the mechanism either, because we saw that with the bodywork as well. The smoke box door doesn't fit properly, the splashers are peeling up from the running plate. This model is not as refined as it used to be, so just 3 star on the quality. Value for money though, don't get me wrong, it's a great price, 98 quid, that's what I paid. RRP 114.95. Yeah, it's a very reasonable price. I wouldn't recommend buying one really, because these quality problems have really flawed this Loco. But if the problems weren't there and the Loco was perfect, this certainly would be a very great value purchase. Overall then, again, that is a misleadingly high score of 7.73 out of 10, but the score does reflect what the Loco does well. Perhaps though it doesn't reflect strongly enough what the Loco does badly, which is quite critical in this case. Okay, into the logbook then, there it is, 18th place, above the Dapol D class and below the Earl class. Yeah, disappointing. I really expected this to be superb. What a shame. As you know, the policy for my channel is that I buy one locomotive and that is the locomotive that I review. And to my mind, that is the fairest way to do it. If I buy a Loco and it's faulty and I send it back and I keep sending a Loco back until I get a good one, that is not a fair representation of that model. I want to give an accurate cross-section of what models are like, and to do that, I buy and review just one model. And if the number of Locos out there with quality problems is in any way small, then the chances of me coming across one should be absolutely tiny, and therefore there would be no problem with my policy. I would suggest that the number of faulty Locos I do see in my reviews suggests that the number of faulty Locos out there is not in any way small. However, because this is so seriously faulty, and I know that it's not supposed to be like that because my older N7 wasn't, I am going to return this Loco. I'm going to send it back to Hatton's and have it replaced. Now don't get me wrong, this faulty Loco was the Loco I bought to review. That's the Loco that gets the score. However, at the end of this video, I will feed back on how the replacement was. I don't know the answers right now because I'm still currently just filming with the original Loco, but I will edit all of the answers in just after this. So for the review of the initial Loco, that is it. Thank you for watching, and here we go with the update, probably filmed a few days later than this. Okay folks, I am back, and it is just the next day, so I didn't mess about. What I decided to do in the end, just to save some time, was order a new N7 and then just send the other one back for a refund, which I've done. And this is why I like to use Hattons, because less than 24 hours later, after I place the order, the replacement N7 is here. And I have to say, I've looked at it, I've unboxed it, and I've inspected it and tested it and everything. I'm incredibly relieved, because based on the other engine that I looked at for the bulk of this video, I just thought Oxford Rail were one of very few companies left who offer good Locos for a good price, and now the quality has gone down the drain and we can't even rely on those anymore. Well, I'm not saying that that's wrong, but the Loco that I've got as a replacement has restored a lot of my confidence. So here is the locomotive that I ordered to replace the original one, and all of the issues I identified with the original example are either much better or gone completely with the replacement, which is absolutely fantastic. So let me just very quickly take you over the differences. So first of all, the gap in the smoke box is still there, as you can see, but it's far less noticeable and it's now acceptable, I would say. Same with the splasher. The splasher is still a slightly dodgy fit to the running plate, but it's far better than it was. The accuracy of the lining is way better. As you can see, all of the lining across the entire boiler now joins up properly, as it should do. Even the decoration around the chimney is much more accurate as well. It's a much better paint job. The issues with the die casting around the coal bunker are completely gone, and the finish is very nice and smooth there. And even the coal, which had some of the decoration issues on it before, perfectly painted now, no white spots whatsoever. There are one or two fresh issues when it comes to decoration, such as this sort of red paint splodged on the boiler, which is a little bit unfortunate. And you've also got a chunk of the lining missing out of the running plate, and something similar going on over on the other side of the water tanks. So this is quite a cheaply produced model, and between the two models that I've looked at, there are a couple of quality issues that are slipping through. However, this example is much better, which is good to see. Mechanically, it's much better as well. As you can see, all of the wheels are actually touching the ground, which is good. And also, the base keeper plate screws are all nice and tight. How suspicious is that? None of them are suspiciously loose, which means hopefully this chassis is absolutely fine. And indeed, putting it on the track, it does seem to perform absolutely perfectly. The other example was completely dead, but this one moved off right away. Good crawler right from the start, not cutting out on the points. And I tried it forwards and reverse on the layout, and I have not seen it derail, which is fantastic. And also the finish on the wheels is much better as well. None of them have that sort of white powdery texture, which really did spoil the consistency of the wheel set. So like I say, I now feel much better about this model. This example is far better. So what we can conclude is that there are issues with the quality control, and shoddy examples of N7s are getting through. Okay, we can reasonably say that, I think. How common those shoddy examples are, I'm not too sure. But this example right here on my hand proves that there are good examples out there. So if this is something that you fancy owning, I would say don't be put off by the potential to have a bad example, because if it arrives and it isn't perfect and it doesn't meet your standard, you can send it back, and obviously there's a good chance that the replacement will be much better. Obviously that's a bit inconvenient and we shouldn't have to do that, but it's good to know that good examples do exist. So there we go. Thank you very much for watching. Bit of a mixed bag. Obviously quality is a slight problem, but the good news is that the N7 is still a good model when you get a good example, which is great. So thank you for watching. I'll see you soon. You take care. Cheers, folks.